Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Reviews with Tyberius D. Today we're going to be doing another video game series, and we're going to do a crash course into one of my favorites. It's going to be Hearts of Iron, made by Paradox Interactive. Roll the intro. Alright, I hope you guys enjoy that intro. I always get a little amped every time I hear it, and Tades did a great job with that. I'm very happy with what's going on. Just want to give a quick shout out to the patrons. Thank you very much. I'm not going to give the full list this time. Just don't want to beat it in everyone's head. But if you want to be a patron too, I'd love to have you on supporting me. And hopefully, as we become a little bit more professional, become a little more refined as this goes on, you guys will like this even more. And today we have pictures. We love pictures, right? So today at least we have that. So we can at least get some visual aids and some references there. I know I've been asked to do that kind of thing. So, without further ado, today we're talking about the Hearts of Iron series. It is a okay, yeah, I get where you're going with that, Wes. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk about this. The Hearts of Iron series is produced and developed by Paradox Interactive. This series has been going on since like 2002. I can't remember exactly. Give me a second. Hearts of Iron 1. Give me a second here. When was this released? Yeah, November 24th of 2002. Now I didn't play Hearts of Iron 1. I didn't know about this game company at the point. If anyone doesn't know who Paradox Interactive is, they are a gaming company out of Sweden that just did some really macro level stuff, and almost all their games can largely be described as Risk on crack. If you played Axis and Allies, if you played Risk, if you played all these games, take that, make it even more complex and more detailed, but since you're running it on a computer, you don't have to spend so much time messing with the units and the pieces and all that. You can actually play the game. And that's one of the beautiful things, is that if you guys ever play Axis and Allies on computer, it's way easier, and you can do it in like 1/3 or 1/4 the time, just because the setup time isn't there. And this is one of the beautiful things about the Paradox games, is that while they are overtly complex, and some people would argue too complex, and we'll get there in one of those games here, is that in a general sense, what they do is they make games for nerds. Now, we'll definitely be talking about this and how that's kind of changing with Hearts of Iron 4 and a few other games, but for the moment, we're talking about Hearts of Iron 1. Now, I haven't played it. I didn't get a chance to because released in 2002, and I came in Hearts of Iron 2 to a large degree, and so I missed out in the introduction to this. The reviews were generally okay. A lot of people liked it. There was some things that there were some problems with, but for early Paradox, it was a pretty good win, and they're obviously, considering they needed to make a sequel, it definitely worked out pretty well for them. I just don't know a lot about Hearts of Iron 1, so I'm just going to table it and say it was okay for what they wanted to do, but when we get into the sequel, Hearts of Iron 2, this is where it really takes off. So, without further ado, let's get into that, shall we? Because Hearts of Iron 2 is where this conversation really picks up. So, pictures! Hooray! This is Hearts of Iron 2, the original promo art that I got to see when I bought it, and I bought it in stores, and I don't know how the Swedes actually got that to pull off, but I literally bought it at my own local Walmart, and holy crap, it was one of the best purchases that I ever had. There's a lot of games that you buy, and you're kind of like sitting there going, 5 years later, man, that was crap, or you just forget it entirely. I still remember buying this game because of the impact that it had. It's one of those games that's like in my top 10, and just has a physical impact in my gaming career, if you want to call it that, where I really enjoyed playing this game to such a degree. So, Hearts of Iron 2, what are you doing? It's Hearts of Iron 1, but just more refined, a little bit more in depth. And I got some visual aids here that I just want to throw up for you guys real quick, so you know what I'm looking at. I'm sorry that this isn't like scaled very properly. Look at it. Excuse me. If you're looking at it from this kind of direction, you're probably like, what is this? Okay, so again, kind of a Risk on crack a little bit. But you have all these units, you have all these things. You can build infantry divisions. Twitch sent me to you via suggested. Thank you, Lisbies. I hope you're enjoying it. I don't know which part it was referring to because I have 3 different forms of content. You're welcome to check that out, but right now we're doing a game review. So, feel free to ask any questions that you have. Hearts of Iron 2, you had a number of resources. You had some Yeah, I guarantee it, Wes. But anyway, Hearts of Iron 2 had quite a number. Is this AAA? No, it is not Axis and Allies, but it is very similar to that, but it's even more refined. And I was actually just talking about that. But looking at your screen, I'm sorry that this is small, but this game was originally a 4x3 game. Obviously, you know, coming out in 2005, 2006, is that it wasn't nearly as refined as what we see in modern day. But what we got here is that you control these units. You can build them how you please. So you can build armored divisions, you can build mechanized divisions, you can build air forces, you can build infantry divisions. Or is this AAA title? No, it is not. I apologize. I thought I was thinking that we were talking about Axis and Allies. Pardon me. Yeah, Paradox is getting out there, but they're not quite there yet. Anyway, without further ado, finishing up where we were going is that looking at your screen here is that you have the ability to move these little counters there, and you can see this in the little boxes, but they also have excuse me, sorry, wrong button. You'd also have these little unit sprites that would be like, hey, you can see an infantry division, or you can see the tanks on the thing, and you can move them into the general area, and you could combat balance these in other regards that okay, I was right, Axis and Allies. You combat balance them, so you could have like one armored division, and then you could have like mechanized off the ass. You could have all these other things. It was really cool, and back during the days of before video game guides were really that big, and having internet patches and all that, a lot of people there wasn't a meta, so you could just go about it. And unless you were like a hard meta gamer, a lot of people really enjoyed this game. And the reason why they enjoyed this game is that a lot of people do consider, if they played most of the Hearts of Iron games, this is Hearts of Iron at its peak. And there's a number of reasons for this. Number one, the gameplay is detailed, but it's not overly complex. You're not literally going, oh my god, what do I do the entire time? There's a little bit of a learning curve, as there is with normal Paradox games, but it's not so much that you're just drowning in that. And you pick up at least the basics pretty quick. This is an infantry division, this is an artillery brigade support, this is a tank division, this is a basically a fighter wing, or this is a destroyer or a battleship. You figure out how everything works. Mostly, it's pretty intuitive. You go about and you play. And so you are the general. Now, the good thing about Hearts of Iron 2 is that in this series that I want to get into, is that it's largely, you are the general. You are in charge of not the tactical stuff that you're used to in R2Ss, where you're like, hey, we're going to move this squad over here, we're going to move this platoon over here. You're general. You're the theater commander, if not the worldwide commander of your forces. And largely, you are the general. You're basically the chief of staff for your entire nation overall. Now, you can play a little bit of politics. You can play a little bit of all this, but largely what this comes down to, at least in Hearts of Iron 2, and there is some additions that I'll be talking about with the expansion packs, but in a general sense here, you're the general, first and foremost. Now, what you can do is that you can go into production and you can be like, hey, I need this infantry division, I need a couple tank divisions, I need some battleships, I need that, but you don't have to worry about it all that much. You can tell them like, hey, take this much for reinforcements, take this much to build new shit, take this much to keep the consumers happy. It's not actually that lot. There's only like 6 or 7 sliders that you really have to worry about. I think it was 6 that you had to worry about, and it was upgrades, reinforcements, supplies, consumer goods, production, and I think there was one other. Maybe I'm thinking of Hearts of Iron 3, because you get Lend-Lease in there as well. But in a nutshell, is that you could prioritize it, and you could even, in some regards, have the AI do it later on in some other iterations. This might be 3, though. But what I'm getting at is that, at least for this game, is that you were largely, you made a few requests. You could politically try to align with, if you wanted to really get a little spooky, you could try to align and get into the war earlier if you're the United States. So instead of Pearl Harbor happening, you can be there when Germany invades France and try to hold off the Axis, or you can preempt the Japanese. Now, a lot of the time, most people didn't preempt the game too much because these games weren't ever built to be metagamed. They were largely there to be like, if you're playing as the United States, you wait till Pearl Harbor happens, you go to town. If you're playing as Britain, you know, the fun is you're standing alone after France is defeated, or you try to save France. That's one of the big, more popular ones, is that you dump everything into France, and you try to keep France from getting invaded, or if you will, you try to keep them from being knocked out writ large. And that was always a fun thing. Or if you're playing the British, is that either you can just let France scoop and get rolled over by the Axis, or you can be there and you can shore them up and maybe possibly hold off the German panzers to the degree that that France will stay liberated. You know, it's basically kind of World War I 2.0, and then maybe the Soviets will get in at some point. History gets really fun and it gets really weird, and it's great when you get these games because there's so many options to you. Obviously, there's some over meta games with that, and that, you know, you can actually get the Americans to join the Axis if you really wanted to, or some of the other stuff. But a lot of the mechanics were actually hard-coded, so that it was really hard to do some of this alternate history stuff. You could do it if you really put your mind to it, where you could have the United States join the Axis, or join the Communists, or you could have a few other things that were within plausible reality. And an example, getting nationalist Spain to join the Axis isn't a far-fetched idea. Now, obviously, in history, that didn't happen, but a lot of people do consider that that was a likely possibility, or a semi-likely possibility that could have happened. And in Hearts of Iron 2, you can do that. You can play diplomacy pretty well, and, you know, if there's not a complete, total defeat of your enemies to where you can just take over their entire country, you can basically sue for peace. And you're like, hey, I'm going to take this, this, and this, and this, and what have you. And the diplomacy system worked really, really well. It was the best one of the game. And so you had a little bit of production, a little bit of diplomacy, a little bit of domestic stuff going on, but largely you're the general. You get to build out your divisions, request them. Sometimes you can get them, sometimes you can't. Oh, and technology. You get to research what you're going to do. But it wasn't overly complicated. And yeah, you are largely focused on being the general. If you're playing the Americans, you are counteracting the Japanese in the Pacific with your naval forces, and you're also trying to send troops to Europe to help shore up the British so they don't get invaded, or fight in North Africa, and eventually lead the charge into Normandy and all that. You can do that. You can play it up a little bit. You can invade Calais instead of Normandy. All of these things are optional to you, and I had thousands upon thousands of hours. I think one of the ones that always sticks out to me was the first time playing Germany. Yes, I know, I'm the evil bastard. When I conquered Moscow for the first time, because fighting the Soviet Union is a slog. And actually defeating the Soviet Union for the first time was just incredible. Because when you're literally like running out of fuel and you're running out of your major trade partners, your back's against the wall, and when you actively win, you feel very rewarded for it. And then, of course, what happens later on is that there will be expansion packs, and of course I have to talk about my favorite one of this mix, which is Hearts of Iron 2 Doomsday. And this is the launch screen for it. I don't have the promo art, but this when you load into Doomsday for the first time, this is what you see, and you know it's on. And so really, what this particular game... Oh, excuse me, I keep hitting the mask off intro. I am so sorry. When you are playing this game and you load into this expansion pack, you can start in 1936. Pro streamer indeed. Anyway, when you load into this game, you can start in 1936. You can prepare for World War II, but there's two options to you. After World War II is over and the Axis is defeated, this game is now expanded upon and upgraded upon to where you can fight the Cold War, or more appropriately, you can fight World War III. And this game has been expanded. Instead of ending in like 47 or 48, you can now play to like 1951 or 1953, and you can, if you set it up right, you can play the Korean War. You can play all of these intermingling things that was going on during the late 1940s, early 50s, to where the World War III, the final confrontation between the Allies and the Communist forces goes into full tilt, and you can literally, you can move the American troops all the way up into Moscow, or you can have Moscow sweep into, you can have Soviet forces sweep into Paris and conquer mainland Europe. all of these options were available to you, and it was, if you thought World War II was the big slog, having the victors go at it with the massive Soviet armies that usually would be there versus the huge naval and air forces that the Allies had usually mustered up coming the end of the war was absolutely unrivaled. And you just get a general sense that, even in the post-war exhaustion, is that you could save it after World War II, you could take a break, play another game, what have you, and then get ready for the final confrontation, which would be World War III, between however well you did as the Allies or the Communists, and then go at the final enemy. And it was incredible, and it was absolutely a hell of a time. I didn't actually do that very much, because I usually start in 36, and once you get through World War II, you're pretty tired. But there was other people who played it even more so, that either the Allies, the Communists, or sometimes even the Axis would reign triumphant, to where they would have dominated the entire world, and they've got, forces, whether it's Nazi German forces, Soviet forces, American forces, in 1949, coming out, winning the final conflict, and being armed with, top-of-the-line weaponry for their era. So, if you're the Americans, you're rolling around in Pershings or very early Patton tanks, to the degree that you are showing the industrial might of your country, and you have all these these very sophisticated weapons that basically, as the Americans, you can be launching your own versions of V2s at people and all this other stuff. It was very open and very capable, and so the options were almost largely limitless, and so you can play that. The big thing that Doomsday added was intelligence. You had spies that you could go about and use. So you could spend a bunch of money, you could send spies to your enemies, and you could send spies to your own self to counter espionage, and it would give you information upon your enemies. Hey, what are they researching? How many of them might be in the field? How many divisions do they have? How many armored divisions do they have? How many ships do they have? How many carriers? How many battleships? And how many aircraft do they have? Bombers versus fighters, that kind of thing. It opened a lot of doors, and Doomsday was absolutely wonderful in the regard of what you were able to do. And it was just one of the best expansion packs that I've ever seen. And it was absolute joy to have. Closing that out in Hearts of Iron 2 is that you had Hearts of Iron 2 Armageddon, which was basically just a bunch of other crap. You could play to like 1964, even though the tech tree wasn't really expanded to any kind of degree. You had a bunch of alternate history things that you could go into, where you could literally play as like some kind of like the Confederacy that never lost and all this other crap. It was weird, but it gave people like an infinite amount of replayability too. It was a whole nother world that you could basically play in an alternate history. I didn't really care for Armageddon that much personally, but a lot of people did. Doomsday was fantastic, and Hearts of Iron 2 was, in a lot of words, it was peak Hearts of Iron for a lot of people. Technology system was pretty good, all this other stuff. There was nothing that was really lacking. You could only make it, you couldn't make it worse, or there was plenty of ways to make it worse, but if you were going to make it better, you were just going to make it more sophisticated, complicated, and detailed, and that's where we get into Hearts of Iron 3. Okay, so in Hearts of Iron 3, and give me a second here, I've got a detail for you. So we're talking about Hearts of Iron 3 now. And Hearts of Iron 3 was my personal favorite, but Hearts of Iron 3 had a lot of problems, and a lot of these problems were not solved at any given point in the whole level. So all the things from Hearts of Iron 2, from the expansions outside of the alternate history from Armageddon, is back. And what does that mean? Well, here's the thing. Everything was kind of redid and re-upped, but some things were added onto, and some things were not. So, let's talk about the general tactical aspect. The map in Hearts of Iron 2, I think, was about 3,000 provinces, and that's not counting the ocean provinces, but it was a pretty sizable map. And so, 3,000 areas that you divide the planet into. You can move things in and out of given areas, and the minimum unit you could build was a division. And moreover, like when you controlled your forces, you weren't commanding divisions, you were commanding corps or armies or army groups. And so, in a general sense here, Hearts of Iron 2 was very, very macro level. Hearts of Iron 3 tried to re-up this by getting a layer downward, in that the minimum unit was more or less a division, but you built out the brigades that made out that division. So In the same way that Hearts of Iron 2 was division into armies, divisions into corps and armies, Hearts of Iron 3 was brigades into divisions. And even starting out, is that it had a hierarchy. Instead of just having these weird assortments where you had, in this unit counter, you had a corps, and this unit counter, you had a lone division, and this unit counter, you had an army, and then this counter, an army group. This time, is that it was layered. You had a hierarchy of power that started with the theater, and then it would go down to army group, army, corps, division. And you could build it all out from there. So you could literally not only build out what you wanted, so 2 tank brigades and a mechanized brigade and then an artillery brigade, something like that. You could reinforce it to, you could allocate it to, hey, do I want this armored division backing up these infantry divisions, or do I want to have all my armor in a armored corps that I could move about and go smack the enemy as with an iron hammered fist? And it was up to you to how you organized it. The problem with a lot of people at this point is that this was getting overly complex for a lot of the players, and this did make a lot of people who enjoyed Hearts of Iron 2 not necessarily walk away, but it diminished the popularity that 3 had. Is that for a lot of people, it was overly complex. Now, overall, the units didn't change much in the regards. Instead of just having support brigades from Hearts of Iron 2, is that they became full active units in their own cell, but they really didn't go separate. And so you had artillery, you had tanks, you had mechanized forces, you had infantry, you had aircraft, you had ships. It was just more in how you organized them that was the tactical or the more strategic level view that was focused on. And I absolutely love this. If you are an organizational beast, or you like to be the general that plans it out and you see the guys on the map, that was incredible. And the reason why this is so important, I forgot to actually say this, is that where Hearts of Iron 2 was about 3,000 provinces, Hearts of Iron 3 was about 15,000 when it was all said and done. It was ridiculous how big this map was. And so instead of worrying about just sending your divisions and your troops into a general region, you sent them into general areas, something on the level of the size of like a couple of counties here in the United States, and how sizable it was. Actually, as a given example, one of the provinces is about the size of Los Angeles County. And some of them were bigger than others, but obviously the places that were largely bigger are places that you couldn't go into, like just wide open deserts that no one could access. But if you're talking about just looking at the map, most of the areas were about the size of Los Angeles County. Pretty sizable, maybe a little bit smaller than that actually, but instead of having these massive areas that you had to move your troops into, now you had tactical flexibility. And this was the major selling point for people that moved from 2 to 3, is that if you wanted to encircle your enemies, instead of having to do it with massive armies that came around in entire regions, you could do it on a tactical level, and you could isolate this division and this division, and you could cut them off in this division and this division. And it was a wonderful thing for a lot of people who really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed it, and it was my favorite, and it was the selling point for me just in by itself. Here's the problems. Intelligence was a thing, it was still there, and it largely was re-upped. I liked it, some people didn't. They wanted a few other knickknacks about it. I think it worked okay. Production absolutely worked fine. No one had a problem with it. Okay, excuse me. Problem. Production split people a little bit, because while the general mechanics were the same in the regard that you could change things up and do what you could at Hearts of Iron 2, the only level is that you had another level down so you could build out your divisions. You had something called practicality in theoreticals, but practicality is what really is concerned here. The more that you did something, the more that you built the industry, or the more that you built infantry divisions, or the more that you built tank divisions, the more that you could do that better. But if you didn't do it, eventually it would catch back up to you, and you would have a penalty for it. This really irked a lot of people, because balancing it to a degree where people really wanted to do what they really wanted didn't work out very well. And there's a mechanical problem that you have here, where a lot of people did some math, and when you combine a tank division with an infantry division, is that in a general sense, they didn't like where it ended up, because I think some math at the original point was that you were overpaying for your infantry, or you were overpaying for a certain unit because they didn't line up quite right, because you would have a penalty for your armor divisions because it was the first ones that you were making, but you had a really good bonus to your infantry divisions, and because you had mixed these units together, they were actually hurting each other to a large degree, and that didn't work over for a lot of people very well, and so the brigade assets were very interesting, and I'll talk about that, but let's keep going on here. The one that everyone agrees that Hearts of Iron 3 screwed up on, and the problem is they made it, not only did they make it, what do you think of MEFO builds in Hearts of Iron 4? I'll get there when we get to Hearts of Iron 4, please ask that then. Okay, the problem with Hearts of Iron 3 is that it dumbed down diplomacy to the point where there wasn't any. It was largely, with Hearts of Iron 3, it was an event that largely triggered what happened, or there wasn't any kind of range to do anything. You really couldn't make any kind of peace. You couldn't, yeah. Basically, in Hearts of Iron 3, a lot of things were either over-complex or they were under-complex where you couldn't do anything. And where a lot of people thought that maybe the organization was a little bit too much, and I can sympathize with that. It was quite a lot. It was a lot of work. The diplomacy pissed everybody off, and even after all the expansion packs, it didn't really get that much better. There was only a very few limited options that you could do that very few limited options that you could go under, and that was largely, hey, join this faction, not join this faction, and basically, get ready for war and trade. That was largely it. That you couldn't really do a lot out of that. Now, there was an entire political tab that you could deal with, and there was laws, and we'll get into that. But it drastically limited the stuff that you could do as far as changing your country's makeup. It was definitively, instead of having any kind of real alternate history at all, this game is really centered around you're fighting World War II, and maybe, just maybe, you can pull out the stringent hairs where you can maybe pull Spain into the Axis or Turkey in the Axis, but that's about it. Everything else was pretty much off board. So you were never going to get a fascist USA or a communist USA unless you triggered an event that got it. And that actually upset a lot of people in the overall regard, to where there just wasn't any diplomatic options. There wasn't anything you could do. It was just fight the war, eventually you win, and you don't even have anything for the peace treaty. And of course, with all that said and done, even at the end, an expansion that would do a doomsday level thing where you could get ready for the Cold War or you could fight World War III just really wasn't there. You could actually do it, but there wasn't any kind of way to balance it between East and West, to where you could sign up a successful peace treaty, to where you could, get some good ground before you fought the next war. It was largely just, okay, hit the declare war button and go. That really irked a lot of people. Even when they actually tried to re-up the diplomacy in Separ 5, a lot of people weren't really upset, a lot of people weren't happy with it, very upset with it, and it was something that was never fixed. I personally didn't care too much. At first I did, because I was used to Hearts of Iron 2, but when I realized what it was actually going for, it was largely just a fuck you to alternate history. It was, hey look, World War II is a major event, have fun playing it. You don't worry about the diplomacy. You're the general. Play the general. And I really respected that more as it went on, is that I really enjoyed playing Hearts of Iron 3 under that aegis. And I think there's a few other things that I'm getting in there. Oh yeah, the politics tab. Instead of having sliders where you can move your country in certain directions, whether you could have it more of an interventionist or hawk lobby, or you can make it more conservative or liberal, or more authoritarian or democratic, is that now you largely had control over national laws and policies that reflected in the bonuses of what your country had. So if you thought that your country was running low on money, you could take it out of education, and you could have less leadership, but you could have more money, and you could spend it on other things like buying resources that you needed and such. The other side of that is that you could basically relax in national conscription laws. So if you were letting out a manpower, you could conscript more people, but it usually came at some kind of benefit or cost. I think people want to do dumb stuff, like me in HR 4 conquering China and Russia as Tibet. It's silly, but Hearts of Iron 3 is devoid of diplomatic stuff. Largely agree with all that, and I'm going to talk about that more in Hearts of Iron 4, because I have some very particular things I want to say regarding Hearts of Iron 4. Anyway, With Hearts of Iron 3, finishing out, there was a lot of things that were there. You had some new mechanics like national unity, and the big one that pissed a lot of people off that made things overtly annoying and complex was leadership. Now, what leadership was in a nutshell, was that it was the intelligentsia of your country, and you could allocate it. Unfortunately, they expanded upon it. So instead of having the team research scheme that Hearts of Iron 2 did, you had leadership, to where the more leadership you had, the more you could research you could do at one time. I really, really liked this, actually, because there were some nations, like the United States, that had amples of leaderships of basically a large, educated group of people that could do all this kind of research. So you could research into tanks and aircraft and carriers and battleships all at the same time, and you had the industrial might to support it, and so you could be the jack of all trades kind of country that could do literally everything. But other nations, to a large degree, had to very much focus. And you had that in Hearts of Iron 2 to some degree, but it was very much prevalent in Hearts of Iron 3. Did I say Hearts of Iron 3? You did that in Hearts of Iron 2 to some degree, but it was very prevalent in Hearts of Iron 3. And Germany is actually a really good example in this, because even though Germany has probably the second highest leadership overall in the game, is that there is so much that you can do between building out a navy, building out a land army, and building out an air force, that you have to kind of prioritize. Are you going to emphasize strategic bombers over tactical bombers? Are you going to be using this particular doctrine or that doctrine? And the problem that this game has is that some of these things probably should have been limited that never were in the tech tree. As an example, you could have blitzkrieg level offensive doctrines at the same time as superior firepower, at the same time as central planning and human wave, and you could literally just make it where your generals were jack of all trades, they could do anything. That probably was a problem that Hearts of Iron 2 didn't have, and Hearts of Iron 4 doesn't have as well. And I think the developers learned from that, is that sometimes you have to hard code options to where if you take this option, you don't get this option. And that was the problem with Hearts of Iron 3. In a nutshell, is that if there was an option, you could largely do anything and everything unless you were physically limited by the resources at hand. And so if you didn't have the ability to produce your tanks or what have you, you just couldn't do it. Or if you didn't have enough leadership to research everything, then you just couldn't do it. And that was a far more physical limitation that I really liked, but a lot of other people didn't, and I can definitely see why. But the problem that leadership fell into is that not only was it responsible for your technology, it came into three other things all at the same time. You had to use your leadership to allocate how many spies you could use. And so you would have to allocate this much leadership into research, this much into espionage for building out your spy forces, this much into your diplomacy for basically building out your diplomatic corps, and then finally, the thing that really upset a lot of people was the officers. Instead of having just manpower alone that you had to deal with and making sure that your troops were manned up and ready to go, you had to actually allocate amounts of officers to being able to handle your troops. In that regard is that not only just you had filling out, but you had to make sure you had NCOs from your leadership cadre that were going to lead your troops into battle. I'm sorry, my eyes are hurting again. It's a bit of the lights and a bit of the allergies. Anyway, to finish this up in a general nutshell, is that leadership was a little wonky because it really stretched it out really hard. That a lot of people were upset because they were trying to get their leadership balanced in a way that they had enough tech to actually get things going the way that they wanted to go. They had enough spies that they could actually defend themselves or do spy stuff, along with diplomacy, which really wasn't that important, but sometimes you really need to use it, particularly in making trade deals and getting people to join your alliance. That was huge, is making sure that you balance diplomacy in a regard that if you didn't have somebody join you, you just didn't want them joining against you. And that was the only major thing that you had to really worry about in diplomacy. But also, it was the massive soak of leadership that officers had to do. I think the long conversation here for leadership in a nutshell that bothered a lot of people is that you were just stretched way too thin on leadership, even for the United States, is that if you were dropping a lot of resources into what you were trying to do, eventually you just felt stretched thin. And either you were building stuff that didn't have a lot of officers, to maintain what you were wanting to do with all the other stuff, or you had these massive armies, but you hardly could keep up on tech and diplomacy and all this other stuff because you were just facilitating this. The Russian players were really pissed with this because you just couldn't do enough with the Russian leadership. And so as a general review here, I think leadership kind of went the wrong way because you had to do too much with leadership in the balance that was just too much juggling. It's one thing where you have to deal with the production and you have to deal with diplomacy, but when balancing overlaps between balancing the technology along with the diplomacy, and then you have to go into the diplomacy and balance that and the technology, a lot of people got upset, and I totally don't blame them. And so, in a general sense, Hearts of Iron 3 succeeds in one thing very, very well. If you want to be the general and you want to be the commander, this works for you very, very well. But if you are wanting to be a little bit more, where you want to deal with the diplomacy and the technology and all that stuff, that is where this game kind of failed. Is that it was either overly complex in the wrong way, or it didn't give you enough options at all. And I hate that it was literally that, because it was like asking for the Goldilocks zone kind of a conversation, but that is it in a nutshell. Is that the problem here for a lot of people was that, you didn't get a chance to really balance it. And you can see this on the screen. I'm sorry that it's really small if you're looking at it. But, you had 6 major tabs. The theater ones was largely just the allocation of resources, of your troops. But, this is the United States player invading Normandy, obviously, and liberating France. And you could do that. Everything that you could do in Hearts of Iron 2 militaristically, you could do in Hearts of Iron 3, but usually you could do it better. And that's the selling point, is that it's more refined. But without mods, this game was largely flawed to some degree, and even with mods, it wasn't. And I want to... Okay, Hazard. The thing I want to end off here is that I am currently modding Hearts of Iron 3. I modded it way back in the day, but it didn't quite go the way I wanted to. But actually being more experienced as a gamer and looking at the way that I want to do, Hearts of Iron 2 is fun, but it doesn't do what I want. I wanted to do the tactical stuff a lot more and get my armor divisions into the particular fights that I wanted to do. And so I am modding Hearts of Iron 3, and I should be done coming out. This is the one thing I'm doing in my spare time that I'm sacrificing everything else for, is just getting this mod up and running so that you guys, if you actually miss being the general, you can play that and you can go about it. And so I'll have a lot of these things hopefully balanced out to where you don't have to worry about leadership nearly as much, and that you can actively enjoy the game a little bit more. Can't help with the diplomacy that much, but I'm just going to openly say the diplomacy is not really the important part of the game for a lot of people. And so that brings us to Hearts of Iron 4. This game is something else. So there's your little promo poster for it. Hearts of Iron 4, a lot of people were really excited to see it because, they definitely said a lot of things that were largely right to people. They realized they learned some lessons for Hearts of Iron 3, and they wanted to move that forward. Here's the problem with Hearts of Iron 3 and 4. 4 does everything right that 3 got wrong. So when it came to diplomacy, you had a lot of options, but they weren't overly complex. But when you could have peace treaties, you could actually assign, hey, look, I'm going to take this, this, and this. You get this, this, and this. You could easily move things around in the regard. And that was fine. It gets a little overly screwy, and this is where I start going into my own personal critiques, is that you could do all kinds of stupid shit when it came to Hearts of Iron 4. And this is what Chinchilla was saying. If he's still here, we can talk about it. Is that you can do a lot of dumb stuff where you can go out and conquer people as Tibet because you can metagame the game really easily. And you can change things to where you can openly say at the beginning of the game, yeah, I'm going to go down the fascist path for the United States. And you're going to have a fascist revolution that kicks off. And you join the Axis or a communist revolution. All those options were available to you. I hate this. I absolutely fucking hate this about Hearts of Iron 4. Is that it's more focused about, literally, the series What If from Marvel. Literally, that's what Hearts of Iron 4 is, in a nutshell. Is that anything that you, the weird and wacky shit, Hearts of Iron 4 is absolutely great. And a lot of people clearly seem to like that. It's the best-selling game of the series so far. And I guess I mean, overall, I can't knock the sales, but as a general saying, this is why I just fucking hate people. People have very unrefined tastes. They want to do stupid, boring, wacky-ass shit. And look, I'm sorry, but, you know, taste is taste. That's fine. But when people's standards are, I want to do this, I don't fucking care. Like, Hearts of Iron 3, honestly, is a better game than Hearts of Iron 4. Still learning Hearts of Iron 4, but I found the politics to be disappointing. I hate it. I hated the politics. I hated the system. In this regard, it's just, hey, focus on this. Focus on this. You can do this. I went in wanting something like democracy. Yeah, okay, that was much. That's a bit much. But anyway, in a general sense for Hearts of Iron 4, is that, okay, going down, diplomacy, kind of fucking sucks. Is that it's great in that when you're interacting with other countries, it's wonderful, but your domestic policies are completely fucked up. You can do anything and everything, and just it completely defeats the point of the series in that regard, is that you're not fighting World War II, you're just playing What If, Marvel's What If, but in a video game, and it sucks. But that's not the worst that we get into here, unfortunately, is that moving it forward is that everything else has been either revamped or bad. Production, I really liked in Hearts of Iron 2 and 3. You just request what you want, and as long as you actually have like the minimum modicum of resources where you could either have the industrial capacity or the resources to build it, you are good. But now Hearts of Iron 4 has taken the thing that everyone hated or that had problems with production in 3 and made it even worse. Now is that you are actually more worried about building the equipment to go to war than requesting it and commanding your troops. And I've actually said that this game not only is a Marvel's What If politically, but it's factory production manager game more than it is being the general. And so instead of just saying, hey, I want an armor division, or hey, I want this kind of thing, you have to build each and every individual thing. And it's not literally like you have to go in and make the game. It's like you're allocating your factories instead of just factories allocating themselves based upon the provisions that you have set forward. Is that now you're allocating each and every individual factory to go and build. Hey, I want this many guns. I want this many tanks. I want this many X, Y, and Z. And it's not automatable. You can't tell the AI, hey, just fucking handle this shit. I don't want to do it. And this ruins Hearts of Iron 4 for me, and in every way possible. I want to be the general. I want to command my troops in the field. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people are like, hey, the number one thing about military strategy is logistics, making sure that you actually have the equipment to fight. 100% behind that. But most generals, this is not their fucking job. You're not the command. When you're talking about army ordnance and how many Shermans you're going to build and go into battle with, that is a specific man's job, and half the time that's civilian stuff, not military. And I 100% get where people thought to bring that into the game. I can't stand this because it actually deserves more of your attention than actually playing the tactical strategic military mindset of that. And this ruins the game for me in a general sense, is that I can't if I can't say, go fucking handle this shit, it ruins it. And the problem is that when we get into this tactical stuff, is that it's the inverse. For Hearts of Iron 3, you could tell the AI to do the tactical stuff and the strategic stuff, but it was kind of crap at it. You kind of really had to do it. Hearts of Iron 4 flips to where, I guess I'll do this. You can make battle plans, and then the AI would carry them out. And it would do so decently well. I'm not going to say it was perfect. It had some problems. But in a general sense, in Hearts of Iron 4, is that you can largely be basically the president and be like, hey, generals, go take care of this. Make sure that, you invade this and you land here. But largely, no, it wasn't. I didn't want something like Steel Division. I didn't. Okay. I wanted something a lot more like Hearts of Iron 3, where you were primarily focusing on making sure that your troops were going into this division, or going into the battlefield. Your tank divisions were going to use this encirclement plan here, and it interact with that. And if you had to go on the fly and be like, oh, look, your armor was countered by other armor or anti-tank forces, you had to deal with that. Instead, you can literally just tell your generals, click the button, and they will handle it. And unless you're literally getting into the micromanaging of the game, which I would be okay with, largely it would just click the button, and then tactical and strategic shit's done. And you have a lot less generals, you have a lot less room to maneuver, and the hierarchy is a lot more uncomplicated. The other side of that is that not only are you dealing with, instead of just dealing with brigades, you could go down to the battalion level, and you could build out your divisions, but instead of just openly customizing them, you had to have experiences, and you had to have experience to change your units to the way that you wanted to see them, and that was bullshit. Like, one of the beautiful thing about Hearts of Iron 2 and 3 is that whatever you wanted, as long as you had the stuff to build it, you could. And you could make changes on the fly. So you're like, hey, look, I'm going to send this armor division to this unit so they can support them. But now is that when you're building out your divisions, you have to completely meet so many different qualifications to get them changed to the way that you want, that it's neither easy or quick or simple, and it sucks. You're basically is this. If I wanted to build a division in Hearts of Iron 3, I would say, hey, look, I want, let's just say it's an armor division. I want 1 armor brigade, I want 2 motorized or mechanized brigades, and then I want some support artillery, right? And the only thing you'd have to do is you have to say individually, I want those things. You wait a certain amount of time, pling, it goes in. Now, if you wanted to change it up, say you wanted an engineering brigade instead of a artillery brigade, you just detach the artillery, you request a engineering brigade, after a little bit, it's there available for you, you clop it on, and you're done. In Hearts of Iron 4, it's not remotely that simple, and it's a lot more complicated, because now you have to make sure that you're in the factory manager position of making sure that whatever the engineer brigade needs to work, you have building. On top of that, you now have to assign that brigade, or you have to assign the battalion into the division builder, and you can't even do it just because you want to. You have to meet qualifications for it, which is stupid as fuck, because you have to have enough army experience to change your division, which makes no goddamn sense whatsoever. Sorry, I hate Hearts of Iron 4. Absolutely can't stand it. I'm just going mask off at this point. So now you got this engineering company or brigade within your division. And then as soon as you get that, now you have to wait for the logistics to fire off. So if you don't even have the stuff needed because you didn't put it in your factories, you now have to wait for penalties where your division is now suffering like critical modifier debuffs because you don't have the equipment for your divisions to work very well. You never had to worry about this in Hearts of Iron 1, 2, or 3. This wasn't the point of the fucking game. The point was you were the general, not the production manager. And literally, it is so bad that being the production manager and basically the civil servant, making sure your politics are in order and making sure your production is in order, that is more the focus of this goddamn game than being the actual general. And I absolutely believe, in a general sense, that Hearts of Iron 4 is an absolute betrayal of the series. It's not even the same game. It actually makes more sense that the game is a Victoria spin-off than it actually is a Hearts of Iron spin-off. This game is fucking disgusting, and quite honestly, Paradox should be fucking ashamed. I understand that it sells more and has made them a shitload of money, but this just goes to show that, number one, people have no fucking taste, and two, that playing to the mob and playing to the masses is absolutely a terrible idea, because here's the thing I will guarantee. If Hearts of Iron 4 stopped production tomorrow, and they said, look, we're done, we're discontinuing this, we're going to be working on Hearts of Iron 5, or we're working on some other project, the playership for Hearts of Iron 4 would collapse within 3 years. And no one would be playing this game because they would move on to something else. Because this game isn't actually that good. People like to play it for the memes, but it's not something that has something intrinsic to it that people are going to keep playing it 10 years down the road for. Hearts of Iron 3 has that to some degree. It's not a lot. A lot of people did move on to Hearts of Iron 4. But the playership, if you actually look at it, for Hearts of Iron 2 and 3, is still holding relatively steady. Give me a second, I'll hit that. Hearts of Iron 2 playership with the Complete Edition actually bumped back up, and people still play it because it's simple, it's easy, and it's fun. Hearts of Iron 3 It did collapse a little bit under when Hearts of Iron 4 released, but there's people that's been going back to it because they miss it. And you'd have to check the player stats, but it's holding relatively consistent because people enjoy that game for what it is. Hearts of Iron 4 obviously is going to have a collapse just because it's not supported anymore, but I expect that 10 years down the road from whenever Hearts of Iron 4 is not being played, or that isn't being supported, that there will be people playing Hearts of Iron 2 and 3 more than they will be 4. And I could be wrong, but I don't see anything that's great about this game that's going to make people continue to come back to it once the memes stop. And the only reason why I think people are playing this game is because every expansion pack they've had on, there's just more memes. Oh, well, now I'm going to play as fascist Turkey now. Or I'm going to conquer the world as Tibet now. It's just fucking dumb. It's absolutely stupid. And so what? There's a few other things I guess I could talk about in Hearts of Iron 4. Yeah, the intelligence that they didn't even have at the beginning of the game, they've kind of re-added it now. It's absolutely fucking gimmicky as shit. I talked about the tactical stuff, is that all the tactical stuff is fucked up. It's absolutely ass backwards. It's literally just anything that Hearts of Iron 3 did bad, Hearts of Iron 4 does good or more of, but yeah, I know. Kazakhstan taking over the world, right? Can't just, oh my god, just kill me now. Everything that Hearts of Iron 3 does well, Hearts of Iron 4 does crap. Which is absolutely terrible. The game's not even about being a general anymore. It's about being the factory production manager, and you can't even automate the shit unless there's some kind of change that I haven't seen now. Because you could actually metagame this to where you could assign your units to do what you wanted them to do, and then you could literally just go in and micromanage everybody, and I could live with that. But I don't want to sit there and focus on telling my civil service, hey, we're gonna enact the great 5-year plan or all this other shit. I don't care. Just give me the amount of industry that I have, and I want to say, hey, I'm going to request this many armor divisions, this many infantry divisions, this many mechanized forces. Fucking build it for me. I don't care. And I don't have that option. And until I have that option, Hearts of Iron 4 is going to be a fucking disaster. And that's kind of where I'm going to end up with. And so, yeah, we're at 52 minutes. I'm going to largely close out on that. And I hate to end on a sour note. Maybe Hearts of Iron 5 will do it better. Or maybe they'll have a... maybe, just maybe, Hearts of Iron 4 will get some updates that it really needs to make it where I don't have to worry about this shit, and I can literally let the AI handle the political focuses, and I can have it worry about building out my troops the way I want them to be built, and it'll notify me, hey, you don't have the thing that you need. Excuse me, but in a general sense, I'm just not happy with 4 at all. I want to be the general. I want more leaders. I want more troops. I want to be able to look at my divisions on the minimum level, and I can hierarchy it. I want corps. I want armies. I want army groups. I want theaters that I can assign this shit to, and it's about half there. Largely, I can deal with most of the framework that they have, but I don't want to focus on building fucking ME-109s under this upgrade. It just kill me fucking now. Okay. Recap. For Goldar, Hearts of Iron 2 is absolutely fantastic. It doesn't have a lot of problems. Hearts of Iron 3 has some problems, but I absolutely loved it to a large degree, even with its problems. Hearts of Iron 4 is incredibly popular, but I just think that just goes to show that fucking the average person is a mouth-breathing dumbass. And so there you go. Hearts of Iron 4. I didn't get a chance to talk about it. The research. The research actually went back more to the way Hearts of Iron 2 was, and I'll actually give them a lot of credit for it here. While I don't agree with everything that they did, it's a lot better than Hearts of Iron 3's research, and that I like Hearts of Iron 3's more, but for the level of complexity versus simplicity, they got it better on that one. And I will wholesale admit that. Research works better in Hearts of Iron 4 for most people than it does for Hearts of Iron 3. Hearts of Iron 3 is a little overly complex in all the wrong ways. But I still enjoy Hearts of Iron 3 because it gave me a lot of options that Hearts of Iron 4 doesn't necessarily do, because having the United States and Germany on the same technological playing field kind of makes sense to me, but the nuance there is kind of missing in the regards that the United States basically is going to be a technological and economic superpower. And with Hearts of Iron 4, I don't get that feeling. And Hearts of Iron 2 kind of did this too, to where technologically either you were kind of like a largely advanced nation. And here's the good thing. Here's the thing that I'll put in. Hearts of Iron 2, you could add more tech teams to your roster depending on how big your economy was. I like that. That's one thing that Hearts of Iron 2 did better than 4. Hearts of Iron 4 is just you're set. You get a certain amount of tech teams. You might be able to add 1 or 2 depending on your civilian focus tree. Again, something I don't want to fucking focus on. But in the end is that you're just pretty much hard-coded to where you're at. And that bothers me greatly. Absolutely bothers me greatly. Yeah, I'm upset. I'm done. Okay, so Unique Income's here. Good to see you. We're just following out here on where we're at. Goldar, good to see you as well. I want to thank everyone for supporting me where you have. Go check out all my other stuff. I'm sorry to end on such a sour, piss-ass note, but Hearts of Iron 4 is just a critical failure for me. And it's not terribly far from being a lot better. Just let the AI automate the national foci so I don't have to worry about that anymore. Let it give me an automation priority so I don't have to worry about building this stuff, and I will completely flip on Hearts of Iron 4. I know the developers can do it. I know it's not going to it's going to be, I know it's literally just a thing where you can click. It's going to be quite a lot of coding, but if they really want to make me happy and a lot of Hearts of Iron 3 players happy, that's the route they need to go. You need to be able to do the best of Hearts of Iron 3 while making up for its failures. And the problem is that right now it's absolutely inverted. I have to deal with the worst of Hearts of Iron 4, and I can't enjoy the best of it. And that's just a critical failure of a game for me. So without further ado, I've been Tyberius D. I hope you guys really enjoyed this review. I'm sure it's a very niche review for a lot of people, because again, it's a video game, but as I've been modding this game and dealing with it so far, is that I just wanted to talk about the series and get another review out for you guys. But yeah, I'll have the stream open for just a little bit for anyone who wants to do an AMA. But here's the outro. Enjoy it, and we'll talk to you in the stream.